Hi everyone, welcome to Ye Old Paranormal. Sorry it's been a while for us, but we are back. This is our second episode when we're going to be talking about the Enfield Haunting. I'm Chris, and this is my co-host, Chris Kilbride. This week we're really excited because we've picked a good topic, and Chris has done a lot of research on the Enfield Haunting, and we're really excited about this one, and we hope you as the viewers are really going to enjoy it.
First on the agenda, every time we do one of these podcasts, I normally try and find some kind of funny stories that have happened around the world. Some of these are old, some of them are new. I didn't find that many this time around, which was a bit disappointing. But the one that I did find, this was in the BBC News on the 12th of September 2020. Basically, what happened is a Slovenian woman named Julia Adlisic took out 5 insurance policies. Her and a boyfriend then decided to saw off her hand and attempt to make claims which would have netted them about £900,000. They even deliberately left the hand behind so that they couldn't reattach it when they got to the hospital. So she claimed that she had lost a hand while cutting branches, and it was found that her boyfriend had been searching for artificial hands before the accident happened, and that's how they found out this was caused by the both of them and not an accident. He was given 3 years in prison, and she was looking at doing 2 years in prison when that article was written. I just saw that and thought that was really bizarre.
Did they shave the extra year off hers because she lost a hand?
Possibly, yeah. But I read that and I was just like, that's a lot of guts to take your own hand.
Just think if we put that kind of effort into planning these as they did to planning that.
Exactly. Yeah.
We'd have
a hit show right now. But yeah, here's the thing. I often think about this, right? And this sounds really dodgy. But you know when you watching films and somebody loses a limb or something?
Yeah.
I always think to myself, losing a hand is so much worse than any other limb. And I think this is just selfishly the gamer in me. Because if I lost a hand, I'd be lost not being able to use a controller anymore and play computer games. You can take my foot, I'll hop around, that's fine, but I can still play games that way. But
you're just more reliant on your hands, aren't you? More reliant. You know, you write, you open, drinks or food, you eat. There's all sorts of things that you do with your hands, but
you know what? I hadn't even
get a wheelchair.
I literally hadn't even considered feeding myself. It was literally games.
That's where you're coming
about losing a hand.
Games, yeah, I can't game.
Yeah, that. Yeah, my life would be so different if I couldn't play computer games. I could get through life with no food. Can't get through life with no computer games.
Ah, you see, I'm the opposite. That's why I'm fat. Swap me around. See, I love games, but that's the first thing I thought of as well. It's going to really affect eating, that is. At the gym, I go to the gym a lot. You wouldn't be able. It really affect your gymming and.
I don't know. It'd be hard to do a bicep curl with no hand.
Yeah, it's still doable though.
Yeah, I suppose you strap in put a strap on. I suppose there are people that do it, but it will be difficult. So the main case that we are discussing today is the Enfield Haunting. What's your experience with this? Have you seen this on TV or any documentaries about it?
The first time I saw this, it was on TV, which I was really drawn to that programme. every so often there's one that you just don't want it to end, and you want to keep watching every part. And I was just absolutely, I was watching it, and I was learning the different things that went on. And I know sometimes they put like a Hollywood spin and make it a little bit more than it probably was. But I found myself, I was on Google straight away, and I was searching for the actual people. And they were saying all these photographs that they had that were real. So I wanted to see that. I was just drawn into it straight away because it was such, say unbelievable, but then in a way, certainly from the stuff that like we spoke about in podcast one that we've seen and witnessed, like it is believable. And I know, like, a lot of experts were not convinced, but some, also there are a lot were, and there was a lot of people that experienced things in that house.
Yeah,
I think you'd be silly to not to rule it out, to just be ignorant and say, nah, it's not. It might very well be a hoax. It might be a very good hoax, but I think you'd be ignorant to just do that. You need to fully explore. I think only the people that have been there at that time can really have an opinion on it.
Yeah, of course. Did you say on the last podcast that you'd not seen the Conjuring films?
No, and believe it or not, I still haven't. Like I say, it's been a crazy time. We've got so much studying to do, and I've had exams, and but I fully intend on enjoying myself this summer. Now everything's opening back up, and I do have a list of films, and that is on there. And I do actually want to also revisit the Enfield series with Timothy Spall. And
I only bring it up. I only bring it up because The Conjuring 2 is based around the Enfield haunting.
Yeah.
However, Ed and Lorraine Warren that were involved in the Amityville case that we covered last time.
Yeah.
In the film, they are shown as being a lot more involved in it than they actually were. So even though that film's based around Ed and Lorraine Warren, that takes a lot of. If I remember rightly, I think there's like a big animated man and things, and it just seems like they've changed the storyline a lot.
Yeah, they've got to make it a bit more Hollywood, haven't they? To drag the audiences into this stuff. But I think certainly with the series that we watched, obviously they changed little bits and stuff, but they'd still stay pretty true. And don't hate on me if it's wrong, but I'm fairly certain that that some people from the original family worked on the series to actually to get it as authentic as possible.
First of all, the Enfield haunting took place at 284 Green Street, Brimsdown, Enfield, which is in London, and that's obviously in England, which happened between 1977 and 1979. It happened to the Hodgson family, and they were the victims of this haunting, consisting of single parent Peggy and her 4 children, Margaret, Janet, Johnny, and Billy. So the first event started after the 2 girls complained that the night before that their beds had been moving on their own, and Peggy thought the kids were lying. That seems like pretty standard poltergeist activity that you get in a lot of haunted cases. And I mean, to be honest, I don't blame Peggy for thinking that the kids were just messing about in that instance.
Exactly, because that's what kids do, isn't it? Kids move things, and my kids had drawn on the carpet with chalk and swore blind it wasn't them and something else had done it. But it said that you can't hold that against Peggy, can you? It's quite logical that the bed's moved. It'll be one of the children have done it.
I mean, you've probably done this yourself, where the kids have gone to bed and they're still messing about, and then they try and act like they've been in bed the whole time and that they are going to sleep and things. So I imagine this was that kind of situation, so nothing too strange yet.
Yeah.
Until the following night at around 9:30, she heard shuffling again in the girls' room, and she went in to tell them stop messing about and go to sleep. Janet told her that a chair was moving on its own, so she took that chair downstairs, She could then hear a shuffling every time the light went out, but would stop when the light was turned back on, and the kids were all asleep at this point in the beds. And then she witnessed a chest of drawers being pulled away from the wall about 18 inches. Peggy moved it back against the wall and watched it move away from the wall again towards her. This time, as she tried to push it back, it wouldn't budge at all. So when she tried to move it, so this led to her running next door to the neighbour's house. I'm assuming she took the children with her. It didn't specify. When Peggy and the neighbours then re-entered the house, they heard loud thumps and banging noises that were coming from upstairs, I believe, and they couldn't explain where they were coming from. So they did call the police at that point. So what do you think about that so far?
I think what starts off as a normal evening, this must have been absolutely terrifying as a parent, because it's, for 1 minute you're thinking, oh, the kids need to go to sleep. I just want a bit of peace and quiet. And you just, not in your wildest dreams would you believe what they're saying to you. But then all of a sudden to have it happen in front of you, and just to have something like 18 inches, that's not a small distance to actually.
Yeah, that's
that's
quite.
You can't explain that. You can't say, that it looks like it was pushed away. 18 inches, it's been moved. There's no denying that. And I think what makes it even more scary, really, is the fact if she's gone and fetched neighbours, and then they've witnessed stuff as well. Because it's normally like this is the sort of thing you see in the films, and then once they go and fetch somebody who's outside the house, all is normal. And then the person looks like they're going insane, but it didn't happen in this case. It was quite, whatever the poltergeist, whoever was doing this, was quite happy to say, yeah, I'm here. It doesn't matter. I'm doing what I want. No one's going to stop me doing what I want. And that's terrifying.
Here's the thing as well. Like, anybody that says this is a hoax and stuff, like, you can because a lot of the time with this case, it's normally said that the kids were messing about and it was caused by the kids. But this is predominantly an event that's happened to the parents as well.
Yeah.
Like, she has literally no. If the kids are playing pranks, like, I don't know how they would create a prank that led to. Fair enough, they might have been able to create it where the wardrobe moved and she got scared. But for them to create a prank where she could then not apply force to move it back, that I generally don't know how they would have pulled that off to convince an adult.
If people wouldn't believe that, people are either going to believe that it's not a prank and this happened, or it didn't happen and she's lying, because there is no way to explain that something moves on its own and then you can move it back, then it moves again and you can't move it, which means some force is stopping it moving.
Yeah.
You're either going to want to believe, will accept that if it's believable to them, or they're going to say, well, no, it's the kids didn't need to think up anything for that because the mum's lying, which it just depends on how you feel about it. But I think one thing that hit home for me was, if you were just to say it was Peggy and her children, maybe the neighbours had experienced stuff, you could say, well, maybe it is a scam. They want to get publicity. Maybe Peggy will split the money with the neighbours. That's what's in it for them. But I think there was over 30 people altogether that experienced things from being in and around that house. That's too big of a people pool, really, to for it to be a scam, because how much money do you think they're going to generate? You're going to have to, every one of those people is going to have to take their cut. It just doesn't work.
Well, we mentioned this last time, didn't we, with the Amityville? The more people you involve in a lie, the more likely it is to fall apart.
Yeah.
And people that have claimed these things have happened haven't come years later and said, "Oh yeah, we just lied for them," or anything like that. But with what you say, the police actually carrying on and going further into it, the police then arrived at around 1 a.m, and they themselves heard tapping that occurred when the lights were turned off. I actually saw a clip of an interview of one of the police women being interviewed, and she seemed she was pretty open about the fact that they'd seen unexplained stuff.
Yeah.
She wasn't hiding it, or she didn't exactly look terrified or anything like that. But she was pretty open on a live interview that was aired on TV about seeing what she saw. So I can't really see a police officer putting their.
It just adds that element to it, doesn't it? Like, why what's in it for the police officer? Why are they gonna lie, or what's in it for them? Are they in on it as well? Like, because, like we said before, there's such.
Well, they just wouldn't be, would they? Because in order for two police officers to be involved in it, and the time they've arrived, they would have to explain this is a prank, it's a hoax. It just isn't feasible that they would be in on it. So those police officers genuinely believed what they saw that day.
Yeah.
To then go on that on air and discuss that and not have issue with possibly their credibility being questioned as police officers and stuff because of this.
Well, because it's a brave thing to do, isn't it? Because if you think you're a police officer, you're in a respectable position, you know that there are certain people that just categorically will not believe what's gone on.
Yeah.
It's very easy to just shut up and say nothing and just be like, it's just a disturbance, all sorted, nothing. But no, they saw what they saw, and they were like, no, I have to say what I saw. Which was a brave thing, really, because they could have been labelled with the same as the rest of the family. Could just say, well, no, it's a hoax, you're making it up. It could count against them in the career, but they didn't. They went on and they said, no, I've got no relationship whatsoever with these people. I attended the scene and I've seen something.
Yeah.
And that's why people don't like that kind of thing. They don't like, because there's no way to say, like, well, what's in it for them? There's nothing in it for them. If anything, it's going against them. It could harm their. People could think they're. Are they in on it? Is it a scam? Or, are they in the right frame of mind to be working as a police officer? If this is the kind of thing that they believe. But they still did it.
That's true. So, after a little further investigation, one of the officers saw a chair wobble and then slide across the floor by about 3 or 4 feet on its own.
Yeah.
After investigating that chair, she couldn't figure out how it had moved. So that's what that particular police officer claimed happened. And to add on to it, obviously this officer decided to fully investigate it and try to figure out a way that this had happened, and felt again, we just discussed, they felt confident enough that this was not a prank, and they went on to discuss it. Well, this particular officer did.
Yeah.
So after this event, the family were that scared that they all slept in the lounge together for several nights. So literally, they all bunked down in the living room.
I'd have been out of there. You wouldn't have got me sleeping in there. I'd have been gone. It's having somewhere to go to as well, isn't it? Certainly in the time when this happened, she was a single mother. Did she have somebody that she could just go and call on? So I suppose maybe, also you got to think, like, would people believe me if I go knock on someone's house I haven't seen for a while and say, can the 5 of us stay? Because there's something weird happening in the house. They're going to think she needs sectioning.
There is that. But that just in itself tells you just how scary the situation was, that she decided to cram everybody in, probably sleeping on settees and floor and so on, which wouldn't have been comfortable when they've got fully comfortable beds upstairs. So over the next few days, children's toys would be thrown across the room. The neighbour picked up one of these thrown toys and said that it felt like it was burning hot.
Yeah.
Which is quite. I don't think other poltergeist activity they feel physical heat from objects and so on.
I've never heard that before, but
Yeah, that seems pretty unique to this case.
yeah.
So Peggy then decided to call the Daily Mirror in the hopes that they could help. I don't quite understand that logic um, of calling a newspaper to see if they. I mean, it did help them, but my first thought if my house was haunted wouldn't be to call the newspaper.
Because I get where she's coming from, because you gotta remember she's probably obviously scared. She's scared to her wit's end at the moment. She doesn't know what to do for the best. If she goes and you think to yourself like, oh, I need a priest or something. But how do you get a priest to take you seriously? Like, even though,
Yeah,
you know,
I mean, it probably that thought. Now I'm thinking about it is probably more a product of current day living, because thinking about it now, like when I was thinking then, like if my house was haunted, what exactly would I do? Probably wouldn't go to a newspaper like people would have done years ago, but then I'd more than likely set up cameras and start recording and probably post the videos on YouTube and things like that for other people to look into and tell me what they see and so on. So I suppose that was the equivalent of that
you
kind of
start,
reaction back then.
like
Because
now,
you
you'd
didn't
be on
have,
the first thing you do, you'd be on the internet, wouldn't you? Straight away, you'd be like,
well, you
so,
didn't even have cameras and things,
no.
did you? At the ready, you'd have to be quite wealthy to own like recording equipment, and even
And I
then,
think,
it wasn't great.
yeah, I think she knew she needed help. It wasn't in financially in a position to do what she needed to do.
Yeah,
And I think it makes sense, doesn't it? If you make the world aware of what's going on, there's going to be so many experts and priests and all these people that are going to want to get involved with this. It's not going to cost her a penny, and it's the best outcome of her getting the situation resolved, as opposed to just going and seeing a priest who might believe or might not. But if he does, he might do some sort of an exorcist. If that doesn't work, what do you do next?
yeah,
But by going to the newspapers, that made the case very public, and now you've got all of a sudden you've got the so-called experts that have got all the technology of the time. You've got the experience in the field, and they're like, right, I want to see, I want to look. Let's put cameras up. Let's try and capture photos. We'll take readings, and I think that's her best. That was her best shot, certainly at that time, to getting the situation sorted. So I completely understand why she went to the papers. And some people
yeah.
will say that's because she wanted the money, she wanted publicity. But what other choice did she have other than go to the papers? Could you see another route where she could get the help
Yeah,
without going to the papers? Because I can't.
thinking about it, the only alternative is to just go to a priest or something, isn't it, really?
Yeah, and if that
Um,
did, which it would be a massive long shot for it to work.
I mean, this technique did work out for her because after going to the papers, they sent out journalist Douglas Bentz and a photographer called Graham Morris, and they both visited the family at the home, and they themselves witnessed things like Lego being thrown around the room, and Graham was also hit in the head by one of these pieces of Lego,
Yeah,
which was so physical that it did leave bruising.
and bruised
Um,
beside his face.
because of this incident, their senior reporter, George Fallows, and a second photographer, David Thorpe, then visited the family and heard the knocking as well. George then contacted the Society for Psychical Research for the family, and they sent one of their newest investigators, Maurice Gross. And it appears that he did quite a thorough investigation with regards to this Enfield haunting. So at first, very little happened, but then he witnessed things like laundry being flung from the kitchen into the living room on its own, and
Mm-hmm.
one of the children was screaming and couldn't move, and the adults had to wrestle to get the child off the bed, and it was as if the child was being pinned down
Yeah.
by somebody on the bed. So Gross claimed that he recorded over 2,000 different paranormal incidents in the house, which include furniture turning over, cups randomly filling with water, and fires igniting on their own as well. I mean, that's pretty serious. Fires igniting on their own. That's a whole other level. That's quite dangerous.
Yeah, if we break that section of information down now, so you've got another person that's come into this, not associated with the family, doesn't know the family, has no, surely for them the story would be better. Well, it would be equally as good for them to call her out on it being a hoax and to prove that it was a hoax, because they're still going to sell the newspapers.
Yeah.
They've brought people in and they've recorded so many incidents. Okay, so maybe a slow start, but these then recorded so many incidents. And
well, Maurice Gross, he wasn't part of the paper by this point. The paranormal parapsychology.
But they'd sent another senior reporter in, hadn't they, with another photographer who'd witnessed before Maurice was brought in. So you've got two sets of media, and then now you've got your first expert that's coming in to look at this, who have all seen things, all witnessed things. None of them got connections to the family, no reason whatsoever to lie. And for the newspaper's sake, like, it would have been just as easy for them to say, no, we've not seen anything. It's a hoax, plaster all over the paper, slander, and then done. That'd be the end of it. But no, they did see things, and that's why Maurice was brought in, and then he's witnessed over 2,000 incidents. That is insane, and we're not talking anymore about like the odd bit of Lego being thrown around, which, don't get me wrong, is absolutely terrifying, and you'd run a mile. But now we start talking about something where fires are starting and people are being pinned to the beds.
That's quite a difference in there from a Lego.
It's as if these extra people are coming in now have angered whatever doing that, and it's like, right, okay, you want to see something, right? Or you're not like if it was maybe throwing the toys, making the noises to scare people out because it doesn't want anyone in the house. But they aren't leaving, and in fact, more people are coming to investigate this. So now it's turning up the activity, what it's doing, and it's becoming worse. But fires starting, cups filling full of water.
Well, there's the fact that furniture's being flipped. That's quite. I mean, I didn't look into it any further, and I didn't find out whether it was things like a table being flipped, or if it was like the level of a settee being flipped, or a bed being flipped. Which, if it, then again, something that happens later does lead me to believe that it had the power to lift settees and flip heavier objects. So, yeah, it probably did flip a sofa here and there and things like that. I didn't look into it, and you probably can't find it, but I'd love to see those like that report with those 2,000 different incidences on, just to see exactly what happened. Now, the fact that things mention furniture being flipped and fires being started, they were probably the high end of things. Other stuff was probably just reports of noises, banging, and stuff.
I found as well. Well, obviously we found researching. Maurice claimed that a curtain wrapped around his neck near to his bed and tried to choke him.
Yeah,
for me, that's again another escalation, because not like you could say fires start, igniting on their own and cups. It's a scare tactic, wanting to go. To wrap a curtain around his neck, is that another scare tactic, or is that wherever this is, this paranormal being, is that trying to kill him?
Yeah, that's very physical, isn't it? You could, I suppose, you could look at it as it just trying to scare people, but you're best just looking at it in the worst case situation, that whatever this thing is, it had ill intent for people in the household, and I mean that's pretty bad, to strangle you with something. Like, again, starting fires that could burn down their house and intentionally, like, possibly kill people is bad.
Yeah.
But for something to physically try and choke you out,
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's
It's escalating, isn't it? It's gone
that'd
from
be
noises to little
terrifying.
bits of toys, yeah, to furniture moving, to furniture being thrown, to fire starting. Now it's going to choking, and it makes you think, like, at what stage would this thing have actually stopped?
I mean, how do you even react in that kind of situation? Because if you were dealing with an intruder or if you were attacked by somebody, you can, I mean, obviously it's not an ideal situation, and I wouldn't wish to put on anybody, but you can at least fight back. You
Yeah.
know what you're fighting back if somebody were to grab you and try to strangle you. Like, you would find an inner strength to at least try and loosen the grip and so on. But how the hell do you do that when there's no physical
Yeah.
thing to attack? It's
That's
literally
a
just,
scary thing, isn't it?
yeah, like, how would you even go up against something like, I wouldn't like being in that kind of situation.
No, it's
So,
scary. It scares the life out of you, and you can't imagine what it must be like. But you can only imagine that if it can, say, hold the chest of drawers 18 inches away,
mm,
and she couldn't move it back. Now, okay, you'd expect it may be hold it off, but if it wouldn't budge at all, that demonstrates the kind of strength that this thing had or has, could still be, you know. So you imagine that with trying to strangle someone.
yeah,
Now that it didn't kill him means it was probably another scare tactic. Because if it wanted to, he could put so much force into it, it would have snapped his neck and he'd have killed him straight away.
yeah.
So it was a
It,
scare. It was another scare tactic. But even so, the fact that it is capable and can actually touch real objects and use them against you, and you can't fight that. You can't fight back.
After that, for a whole month, the family had to then deal with all manner of objects being thrown around some of the rooms. So it went back to just launching things. As an experiment, Gross had one of the rooms completely emptied of all throwable items. They heard a loud vibration as if someone was drilling and found that the cast iron fireplace had been ripped out from the room. When this happened, the kids weren't in the house, so it definitely wasn't done by any kids. And what made it even stranger is that the pipes had also been ripped clean in half. With what we mentioned before, this was a complete act of it kind of showing its strength, really.
Yeah.
Again, if you'd just been choked out by this thing and you could see that it could bend metal and pull cast iron fireplaces out of the wall, I'd probably be thinking about leaving at this point, personally.
Yeah.
Because, like you say, if it can do that, it could have easily just have snapped his neck rather than choke him out.
It makes you think, doesn't it? If it was just strong enough to do all these things, and it desperately, desperately wanted those people out that house after so many weeks, why did it not just kill them?
I mean,
There's
cast
no
iron's
reason.
pretty heavy into it. Like, them old fireplaces, aren't they, like, stupidly heavy?
Yeah, I mean, it depends how big the fire was, really, doesn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
you would expect if it was like just a normal fire surround that an adult could pick it up,
Well,
but
it's
to rip it out, that takes something else.
Well, it specified that it was quite too heavy for the kids to move, so I imagine it was quite a big
Yeah,
iron piece. Maurice Gross and Guy Lyon Playfair, they were both convinced that everything that was going on in the house was real. Others believed it was the works of the children, who eventually admitted that they did sometimes mess about and play on things a little bit, but the big events were nothing to do with them. These little tricks were always caught out by Gross in the moment, and very different in comparison to the big events. So basically, when I think I saw it, I think he quoted that 98% of the things in the house were definitely paranormal and unexplained,
yeah,
whereas the other 2% was quite clearly when the kids were playing on the fact and messing about, which is understandable. Kids are gonna mess about,
there's real things going on. They are probably going to be aware that people won't believe them, and if they've got these experts coming in and nothing's happening at first, they might be scared that this expert's going to think it's just a hoax. There's nothing going on. It's a waste of time and leave. So they may, as children, wanted to do little things to keep them interested until one of the real things happened. And because they are experts, luckily, like you say, they
knew straight off the bat when they were messing about.
What the kids were doing. They were like, yeah, this is the kids messing about. This isn't real. But the kids, they will have been doing that for a reason. Maybe at first just to mess with the people, or it could have been that they wanted to keep their interest, like, no, please stay around because something's really wrong. But the important thing is, when the real things happened, they knew about what they knew, and that's people there, that two experts, absolutely 100% were certain that this was not a hoax and this really happened.
I mean, for the people that claim it was a hoax, for them to claim that 2,000 events were pranks by children, that's a lot of, like, if they've done 2,000 odd incidences of pranking them, and they couldn't figure out how they'd done it, if some of those kids had gone on to be magicians or illusionists or something later on in life, then I'd be like, okay, fair enough. These were pretty skilled kids, like prodigy magicians kind of thing. But they haven't, so it doesn't really hold the hoax theory that these kids were doing all of. I mean, they may have got away with one or two, but
2,000 too many.
Yeah, like that's a lot for a bunch of kids to be hoaxing and pulling off crazy, wild things that you can't prove. So that kind of falls a bit on its face, that theory. Gross began to realise that the knocks were actually quite intelligent. He began to ask them to answer yes and no questions. So 1 knock for no and 2 for yes. And when they asked if the entity was dead, it knocked 53 times. So a part of me feels like this entity was taking the mick a little bit at this point.
Yeah.
To like knock that many times. By the time November came around, the events had been taking place, for over 2 months, and Janet's behaviour began to change. So on November 26th, a doctor had to be called to the house as Janet was behaving wildly. She had to be calmed down by the use of Valium, which put her to sleep. And half an hour later, they heard a loud crash and found Janet still asleep, but she was on a dresser in a kind of kneeling position on a wide clock. It appeared that she'd been thrown 14 feet from a bed to the dresser. Her dresser. So that's questionable. The fact that the kid was doped up on Valium.
Yeah.
I mean, doesn't Valium like knock adults out?
Yeah, if you have enough of it. It would certainly do that for a child, but it's one of those ones that comes down to, are you a believer or you're not a believer? Because if you're not a believer, you'll say that, well, that's rubbish, she didn't take it, or she acted like she took the tablet and then spat it out.
Yeah. There is that, I suppose.
You are a believer, then you'd be like, yeah, she took it, and she would be completely out. Like, there's no explanation. So certainly, it just is another one of those, you have to believe it, don't you? You have to believe it. But there are far too many things that went wrong in that house to far too many people for it to be a hoax. We're not talking about one family and their neighbours, or a couple of people in the street where you could say too many people, too many incidents. And if you're not a believer, you can always think up an excuse or a reason as to why. If a kid taking Valium should be out, at the very least extremely drowsy.
Yeah.
being, not climbing up onto a dresser like that, like they could claim that she did.
Well, they wouldn't even be in the frame of mind to be thinking of pulling pranks at that point if they're on Valium. I mean, the other alternative is the other kids were able to pick her up and drop her on it, but other than that...
Again, what's the point?
Yeah.
If you're going to the length, if these kids are going to the length, and that's what they want to do, and they want to make it seem as though she's been thrown.
Yeah.
For one, you've got to think that she's in on it. She can't be the only child not in on it, and the other, it's only the siblings doing it. So she wouldn't take the Valium. She'd act like she takes it and then spit it out.
Yeah.
Or or for whatever reason, or before it takes full effect, she could go and do it. But again, it's just too many ifs, buts, and maybes. Like, why? What's the point?
Yeah.
What that family gain from this? Okay, it's a famous thing that's gone on, but I know from this happened like in the 70s. People weren't chucking. It wasn't the internet where this could go viral and they could make money off that. It was in the news. Okay, they have done they've done a series about it, and I suppose a film link, but I don't think, to my knowledge, not everything that when I've researched and I've found, the family don't look like they're well off. They don't look like they've made serious money, and everything they've said, they just wanted a quiet life, and they wanted to just be left alone in that house. But wherever was there, didn't want them.
Yeah. Well, because of this incident, Gross then set up a remote control camera that could take bursts of photos every 4 seconds.
Yeah.
And they, on this camera, they captured a pillar being thrown by nobody and was like twisting in the air. A curtain also twisted on its own when all the windows were closed. And the most talked about image that was taken during those camera bursts is of Janet levitating in the air.
Yeah.
Now, the pillar and stuff is strange.
Yes.
I imagine it's not impossible that a kid couldn't have climbed onto the camera and thrown a pillow and so on and not been seen. But I've seen the images of the levitation pictures.
Yeah.
And I don't think it looks like she's being levitated personally.
It looks more like she's been thrown.
It looks more like she's kind of just jumped off the bed kind of thing and is mid-jump. You've seen other images where it shows people levitating and they are questionable because they're literally lying horizontally, aren't they? So,
lying, aren't they? And they're just floating.
Yeah, so that is questionable, but for that, it just looks like she's jumping in a really standard way as well. She's not even like throwing her body in a way to make it look semi-levitatory. I don't even know if that's a word.
The picture of her bed, it doesn't look like the sheets. Like if you stood on your bed now and jumped, and a picture was caught of it, wouldn't there be like an indent where you've been standing or something like that? But on her picture, I know the bed has got a few creases in it, but it does look relatively flat, as if she was there and then just got through off it. Now I know her body position looks like she's jumping. Her legs are bent, like so if you've just jumped, your legs recoil up, don't they? And that's what hers look like they're doing. So that is this picture. Although it's one of the most famous pictures of this case, you could argue is one of the reasons that people will doubt it, because it does look like a girl playing up for the camera has just jumped off a bed.
I'm not particularly sold on that particular bit of evidence.
No, and that's what this podcast is all about, isn't it? We're not here to say, well, for one, everyone's entitled to their own opinions, but we're not here to say this is what happened, just because we'll never know what happened, and you do have to believe an element of it. But we will not also just talk about it from one side, So there is also, we will discuss the element of, could this be a hoax? It's a very good hoax.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the reason? Why did they do it? What did they get out of it?
Yeah.
Do you want to be? Was it to what? to be famous in the 70s, well, you're not going to make much money. And just everywhere you walk, you go down to the shops, stop people pointing and looking at you, thinking that's that family who haunted.
I know it's more widely accepted now, things about the paranormal, but back then there was a lot of stigma. Even just being a fan of things with the paranormal.
Yeah.
I know they catered to people and they put shows on for people that like the paranormal, but there's still a bit of a stigma with liking it now. Like you'll still meet somebody today where you'll say, "Oh yeah, the paranormal this and that, it's all crap.
Yeah,
None of it's real," and they don't even listen to your argument. They just snuff it and they just have a kind of you're a bit of an idiot kind of impression for believing this kind of thing, that kind of attitude. So that still lives today, but it would have been stronger back in the 70s. A lot of these people
in the 70s it would have been 100 times worse.
Yeah, I don't see why people would have done it intentionally if there was nothing happening.
I mean, people just wanted the attention. It could be as simple. We're trying to overplay it, and they wanted the attention from it. They wanted, maybe people already looked down the noses at them. Maybe they already got people, talking behind their backs. So maybe they just did it, and they thought, well, you know what? Let's give them something to talk about, and it'll get us in the papers and things. But I personally don't believe that. I think that image of her on the bed, the levitate, is quite damaging. But again, it doesn't say that she jumped, and it doesn't say that she didn't. Because I suppose I've never been thrown through the air before.
Yeah.
Through me, would my legs recoil back up? I don't know. I can't answer that. And I don't think any of us can really, unless you've been thrown and you've got an image of what your body looked like, because that could
That's
just
true.
Might, naturally that just might be what her body did. It looks like she's jumping, but we are.
That's true.
And experts of that time were adamant that they weren't faking.
I with the whole hoax thing, I'm more inclined to believe more up to date cases of hoaxes than these older generation ones. I think even though people claimed a lot of these older cases were hoaxes, but I'd be more inclined to believe they were genuine more than now because people are more aware of things like the internet and fame and stuff like that. So I could see a hoax being more accessible now rather than back then. Like the internet is filled with paranormal footage, and some of it looks pretty genuine, but a lot of the time you're just like, is it real though, or have you just done this for the millions of views you've got on the video?
Yeah, and that's the difficult side of today, isn't it? That everything's online. The social media is massive, and people do pretty much anything, likes and videos, like record a podcast. But back then, I just can't see what is in it for them to do. Did they think that some newspaper was going to pay them an obscene amount of money to do an article, and that's why they did it? Maybe
they might have got a bit of money for repeat articles, I suppose. I don't know. I've never been in a paper article, so I don't know how it works. I was under the impression that
unless
local newspapers, you didn't get paid for them.
Unless you do a deal, a specific deal with them to say, right, we'll pay you X amount of pounds for the article, then I've been in for the Cub Scouts and things like that, but you don't pay anything. Just photographer turns up, takes your photo, has a quick word with you, and that's it. But then that's not the kind of thing that they did. But theirs was an actual story. You do hear that people do get paid for the story, but really, is it really worth going through all that for the small amount of money they probably got from it? And a lot of research out there about the Enfield that we've been able to find, but you can't find anything about their net worth or what they gained. And like you say, they didn't go and get celebrity careers from it. They didn't seem to make loads of money out of it. What was the actual point? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
We could say that a TV series and a film is based on their life, which is pretty cool. But I think Me personally, I choose to believe that they're telling the truth, and they just
Yeah.
wanted to stop.
Soon after, Janet soon began to talk in a gravelly, well, she started talking in like a gravelly voice, and she also started making barking sounds and whistles. This eventually became a low, guttural kind of voice, and she claimed that it was like somebody was behind her, putting the hand on her neck and making her talk, kind of thing. So, in one recorded interview, Janet referred to herself as a man named Bill, and it was later found out that the owner of the house before the Hodgsons was named Bill, and he died of a brain hemorrhage in his favourite chair in the living room. So, Gross claims that they filled Janet's mouth at one point with water and taped her mouth shut, and she was still able to talk in this like guttural voice. John Hasted and Adrian Forson at London's Birkbeck College did tests, and they found that Janet was using a false vocal folds to talk. For someone to talk using these false vocal folds for long periods of time, it would cause a sore throat and can even cause long-term vocal damage if you keep on doing it. However, Janet would speak in this voice for hours on multiple times and didn't show any signs after of having a bad throat. You know, when you were a kid and you used to do like a low guttural voice thing and it absolutely kill off your throat. Basically, she was doing that, but she'd do it for long periods of time, and what should have caused damage didn't cause damage for her. So I'm a bit 50-50 on this. I don't know whether I believe it or not.
Who did she speak to when they tested her? They put water in her mouth. Who was that?
I'm not. I'm assuming it would have been Gross, the parapsychologist.
See, because that's something that's unexplained. You can't explain that. You just can't speak if your mouth's full of water.
Yeah.
So it's got to be something else speaking through you. Again, it goes back to Gross. So what's in it for Gross? Why he's not part of that family? He was called in as the expert. I suppose cynical people will say he could he'll make so much money off it because he could write books and there'd be TV there'd be interviews and things like that. But what it just seems like it's too far fetched. Like this family have had this stuff happen. Now they've gone to the papers and found. Now they've been put in touch with Gross, and now he's saying like, "Oh, I can get a book out of this," and so I'm gonna back up everything they've said. It just doesn't seem too likely. More likely, it's going to be that things happened. She didn't know what to do. She went to the newspapers. They got him. More reporters came out and eventually got put in touch with him, and he actually saw and witnessed stuff, and that's why he backed up what they were saying.
Yeah.
So that if everything else he said is true, he doesn't need to start fabricating stuff. So which means that maybe the water thing is true.
Yeah. Well, in July 1978, after this had been going on for almost a year, Janet was admitted to Maudsley Hospital for psychiatric testing, but was given a clean bill of health after 2 months. And when Janet returned home, the disturbances appeared to start to calm down. So I'm assuming while she was there, while Janet was at the hospital for those 2 months, events were still going on. But then when she returned, it started to ease off a little bit.
Yeah.
Which I believe would, because normally a lot of paranormal cases normally involve a teenager, don't they? They think that a lot of it's not ghostly, but more telekinetically caused by like teenage hormones and so on. They can't quite explain it, but that's one theory. So I can't remember the name of the other sister, but if Janet was at a hospital, I think wouldn't that leave the other sister as possibly being the cause of all of this stuff?
Yeah.
So, Janet stated years later that the events started soon after the two girls had played around with a Ouija board and started coming to a halt after a priest blessed the house. However, her and her siblings have always stated that there was still a presence in the house that felt like it was watching you. So basically, this may have all been started by a Ouija board, and after a blessing, it seems like it calmed down, but whatever it was still present.
Yeah.
I don't know. It seems like for
Well,
how
that's where
bad.
it starts becoming more far-fetched. A Ouija board. I mean, again, I'm sure, rightly or wrongly, people believe in Ouija boards. Some people don't. I've never been brave enough to do one myself, if I'm being brutally honest. Like when I've seen people who've had them, they're like, "Oh, should we do one?" I'm like, "Nope, get me away from that."
I've done one, but I never did one as like a kid or anything like that. But it was we went to when you can go to an overnight ghost hunting thing. We went to one of them, and there was a group of us doing the Ouija board, and at the time I was just like, this is bullshit, because there was a guy who quite clearly had most of the pressure on the glass.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it's called now.
Yeah, but it was
If you make a cheap one, you'd use a glass, but there's a proper name for whatever they use.
Yeah.
And this guy just wasn't looking, and it was spelling out the most random. They weren't even words, and they were jotting down all these random letters, and like, what does it mean? What does it mean? And I'm just looking there to this guy, going, it means this guy is just pushing it to random fucking letters.
Yeah.
And it's not really like, spelling anything out, but they were so invested in this being genuine that they didn't even look to see what was happening in the room to see.
Yeah.
But that's the only experience I've ever had with a Ouija board. I don't even know why they were investigating that out, because there was no like dark history or anything. I've never understood that when people investigate just random buildings and stuff. Like,
Just and the hope, I suppose, is just looking for something else.
yeah, I mean, somebody like my friend who does it, I think they kind of do old derelict buildings a lot of the time, and they've been lucky and they've found some haunted spots. But me personally, if I was haunted, like investigating places, I'd want like full on dark history.
Yeah.
Like, demons could be following you home kind of hauntings if I was going to investigate one, which is probably stupid, but yeah.
Well, you do the investigating, and I'll do the theory work back at home, and then you let me.
After Peggy Hodgson died, a woman named Claire Bennett and her 4 sons moved into the house. She claims that she never saw anything, but it always felt like they were being watched, similar to what the previous family said still happened after the blessing. Her sons would wake in the night after hearing people talking downstairs, and they ended up moving out after only 2 months of living in the house, which was caused by one of the sons seeing a man enter his bedroom, and he was that terrified that they ended up moving out of the house the following day.
Yeah.
So the family after, there was weird stuff happening, but they were just like, nah, I'm not sticking around for this, I'm gone. So
again, points to more evidence towards it not being a hoax. And if they had stayed longer, maybe they had more stuff to report on.
Well, the current resident of the house is just insistent on refusing to talk about anything that may be going on in the house. She says because she doesn't want to scare the children. So I don't know how to take that, because you could take it as nothing happens in there. Don't want to bring up the past and end up scaring the kids, and psychologically they start thinking it's haunted. Or it means stuff happens in there and she's convinced the kids that there's nothing to worry about, and this would just clarify that they are living in a haunted house. Like, there's different ways you could interpret that, but regardless, it doesn't give you any information of whether it is haunted now or not.
No, like I say, it could be one of two things really. It could be that things are obviously bad, not as bad, but are happening, and she doesn't want to frighten the kids. Or it could be like, I don't want to drag this up, because if wherever it has moved on, then great. But if it's still here, but just sort of just not interacting with us, we don't want to anger and get them and bring these things on. So it's quite understandable. But again, you'll never know unless you actually go in that house yourself and you spend a period of time, you know, and not just talking about a night or 2 nights, you know, a couple of months, you know, and you might not see anything ever, but I think we all at some point in our life sort of get that, you know, when you feel like somebody's watching you.
Yeah.
So I think that's, you know, she's obviously experienced something like that.
Well, we originally looked at this case because of the first Amityville case that we looked at had Ed and Lorraine. We decided on this because of Ed and Lorraine Warren. But it turns out that they travelled to the UK in 1978 and they investigated the Enfield house and confirmed that it was haunted. But their visit was very, very brief. And it's rumoured that they were only there for a day and they literally just turned up uninvited, went in, had a bit of a nose around, and then whoever it was, the family or Gross, is Maurice Gross, pretty much were like, nah, this is our investigation, get lost kind of thing. I don't know if that's the situation. But considering they're in the Conjuring 2, and portrayed as like being the lead investigators of it and that, they were barely there.
Yeah, it takes a lot away from the actual investigators that were there. So I wouldn't be too pleased. Like I say, it's a long time ago now, and
that shows how popular the case must have been, though, because they predominantly did stuff in America, didn't they? Because they were from America. So for them to get on a plane back in the 70s and travel all that way to the little UK to find this one little house in the middle of a foreign land to them as Americans, shows that this must have been like a really big case at that time, especially within like the paranormal community, for them to have took an interest and only have spent a day there.
I mean, maybe they wanted to spend a bit more time, but they were just told, like, you know, this is ours, go.
Yeah.
But it's very difficult to really see what it would have been like at that time.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's not really that long ago, is it, when we talk about the 70s? But the world has progressed so much. Like, everything is so different now. You wouldn't have had the internet. It would have been a phone call. So it would have, you know, maybe they had heard rumblings within their community of, oh, this is what's going on. So maybe they were like, right, yeah, I want to go over. I want to try and get involved in this.
Yeah.
I think it's really wrong that they were there for such a short time, and yet they're in the new Conjuring. They're portrayed as being the main.
Yeah.
It's just like, what is the significance with them really? Like, they could still have just had those go to the Enfield, and then bring in like the new characters, the actual people that did it.
Or they could have just chose the hundreds of different cases that the Wardens looked into.
Yeah.
Like they didn't actually need to do the Enfields because they changed so much in there anyway. It's not even recognisable as like the stuff we've discussed. I don't even think hardly any of that happens in the film. It's all like weird animation monster things, and it's very different to the situation that happened.
That's what you expect with films, though, isn't it? They need to put that, you know, that spin on it to make it draws the viewers in. It's what you expect from them. Well, like you say, it must have made such an impact to have people come from America at that time, and that even now people are still talking about it. Series are still being made, and they're
Yeah,
still films. It really is quite a unique case, isn't it?
yeah. Well, it was Maurice Gross. My notes are dead bad. I'd put Maurice Gross at one point, so I do apologise for mispronouncing that if Maurice Gross is still alive and ends up listening to this. So it has been suggested that Maurice Gross implanted the idea of the voice into Janet's head, as she is rumoured to have, he's rumoured to have said, all we need now is for them to start speaking to us. And soon after that, she began talking as Bill through the voice. So they believe there may have been that might have been the kids carrying on like it was suggested. So therefore, they then decided to do that.
Yeah, or it could be whatever was in that house listened to it, said, "All right, then you want to hear me speak? I'll speak." It's very weird, but like when she was speaking though in that such a deep voice, she should have had that damage to her throat, but she didn't.
Yeah, that. See, I've seen clips of the kid talking, and it doesn't look very believable.
Doesn't
It looks like a kid
the kid's just putting it on?
putting, yeah. But then when you take into account that for that kid to have done hours and hours of that footage and not have any vocal damage, that's when it's like, oh, okay, that it looks hoaxy, but then when you take that scientific fact into the equation, it's a bit like, oh, but is it a hoax?
Yeah.
Or is she just one of those freak children that can do that, and she was just lucky that it didn't cause any damage? So, yeah, there's two instances where. So, first of all, two investigators caught the girls bending spoons at one point.
Right.
And it was seen as strange that nobody was ever allowed to enter the room when Janet was talking in Bill's voice as well. These both go against them and are more taken into account as the idea of it being a hoax. Two kids bending spoons, that sounds like when we mentioned before that the kids would try to do things and you could tell that it was the kids behind it and not whatever this was. That's kind of a clear example, isn't it, that things are being thrown across the room, things are being uplifted, and the kids are in the kitchen bending spoons.
Yeah.
But apparently it's all a hoax because they've been seen bending spoons. It's like very different in comparison to the other things, so I don't really think that stands as being a hoax.
Well, Maurice had already said, hadn't he, that there were things that the kids had done that he knew was them.
Yeah.
So the spoon bending, that could just be one of those things that he'd seen and he's thinking like, what they're trying to do. But he was quite adamant that he'd seen things that they 100% hadn't done or couldn't have done.
Yeah.
And it's dead frustrating because this is going to be one of those cases where you're never ever going to truly know. You can believe what you want to believe and you can have opinions, but you'll never get to the bottom of it because unless you were there and you witness it, you won't know for sure. And there'll always be somebody, not everybody can be there, so there'll always be someone that says, it's not real, didn't happen.
Yeah, of course. In a 1980 interview as well, when Janet was asked what it's like to be haunted, she replied that it's not haunted, and then a sister leaned in and whispered to her, which was heard, shut up, while also giggling when she did it. I think I remember seeing this clip on a documentary, and basically she's come out and said it's not haunted, and then a giggly sister's kind of leaned in and said, shut up, you're kind of giving it away kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I suppose it depends how you look at that situation. Is it a case of shut up, you shouldn't be saying anything? shut up, you're giving away that it's fake, or
She knows that she's on the she's been interviewed. That's why her sister's laughing or chuckling.
Yeah, so that's all my notes for this case. Have you got anything you want to add to it?
Just that it's such a bizarre case, and no matter what we all think and however much research, we could have researched this for months. And I still think we probably only have the same amount of content as we've got now, because there's only a small section of information out there, really. There's so many gaps in it. And like we said before, unless you were truly, truly there and you witnessed things, then people will always say it didn't happen.
Yeah.
And it really comes down to if you believe. And I think there are a lot of things that went on in that house that I do believe. But then within the same breath, I hope that he wasn't a hoax, because there's a lot of people, a lot of money has been spent making these films, and for people, and part of the appeal to them is because you can say, oh well, that really happened, or that's based on a true story.
Yeah.
And you actually find, if after then you find out no, it wasn't, it was actually a hoax, you kind of feel like you've been robbed.
Yeah.
After everything that we've seen and within the research we've found, I more choose to believe Maurice than the actual family. I think, if they were bending spoons or doing little bits to try and make it out like there was something extra going on, but he was the expert, and he still said, in spite of everything that he saw that the kids were doing to make it worse,
yeah,
he still was quite certain, that it was real. That's just my opinion, and I'm sure viewers will have their own opinion. They might just think, no, it's absolutely a load of rubbish. It was quite clear it was a hoax. But can you say that 100%? You can't say 100% because you weren't there, which means there's always going to be that air of doubt, and you just don't know. And I think that's what makes some of these cases interesting, is we don't know what went on. You can guess, you can be 99% certain, but there'll always be that 1% you don't know. And I think that draws people in, isn't it? You don't know.
Well, I'm thinking it's more genuine with this one. Yeah, I think it's more genuine, but I do think there was some messing about with the kids involved in there. I don't think it's all genuine, but I think a lot of it is. And I think probably a few hoaxes probably got in as paranormal, but I think predominantly, especially from the beginning, I think it was all real from that very strange moment at the beginning. How much of the later stuff is real is questionable, but I think originally there was a case here. I don't know if he died down and the kids carried on creating stuff or what, but yeah, there's some realness to this, and there's also some hoaxy stuff to this. It's a bit hard to tell, but I'm going more along the lines of it being real with this one.
Definitely.
So yeah, thank you for watching. That's today's show. I hope you enjoyed it. We're not sure what we're doing on the next one. We've got to decide yet. But if you liked this video and you're watching on YouTube, make sure you leave a like. Make sure you subscribe. And if not, if you're listening to us on the podcast, thank you very much. And we'll be back in a month or two, maybe. We're not going to give it a time frame at this point. And we'll see you again soon.
Hopefully next time you guys see us, we'll be in the same room together when COVID allows.
That's a good point, actually. Hopefully, with us coming out of lockdown and hopefully life going back to normal a little bit, hopefully we'll be able to, actually interact in person and not have bad Skype quality and so on, and hopefully make it look a little bit more crisp and cleaner.
And as we go through these and we work through them, hopefully our podcasts and our videos will get better, because this is still our second video. So we've got a lot more content we want to deliver. There's so many different things to research. So if you guys let us know in the comment section if there's any that you are particularly interested in and you'd like us to go away and research, that's something definitely that we'd love to do. But until then, we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.